There is a certain silence that falls between the gaze of one being and another, a silence more revealing than words, more ancient than language. You may not realize it, but the way your eyes rest upon the world, the way they seek or avoid, the way they soften or harden, is the whisper of your unconscious speaking aloud. I have always believed that our gaze is not just an act of seeing, but a mirror, a symbol, a path into the deepest layers of the soul. You think you are looking at the world, but in truth, the world is looking back at you. And in that reflection, the secret forms of your inner archetypes are revealed when you look into the eyes of another. What do you truly see? Do you see them, or do you see the projection of your own inner figures, the unseen characters of your psyche? We are not merely individuals walking through life. We are the carriers of an ancient inheritance, a network of patterns older than memory. These are the archetypes, the universal figures, images, and motifs that dwell in the collective unconscious. They shape how we love, how we fear, how we interpret the world, and though they hide in the shadows, they reveal themselves in the subtle movements of our gaze. When your eyes linger on something with fascination, it is not just curiosity. It is the archetype of the seeker stirring within you, calling you toward what your soul is yearning to integrate. When your gaze hardens in judgment, perhaps it is the inner tyrant or the wounded child projecting its unresolved pain onto the outer world. I often tell people that the unconscious does not speak in the language of reason. It speaks in images, in symbols, in subtle signs that appear almost accidentally. Your gaze is one of these signs. It is a compass pointing not just toward the world, but toward the hidden places of your soul. Have you ever noticed how some things attract your eyes irresistibly, as though a magnetic field is pulling you toward them? This is not mere chance. It is your unconscious leading you, whispering, here lies something you need to confront. Here lies something you need to awaken. There is an old truth I have discovered through years of studying dreams, myths, and the human psyche. We do not see with our eyes alone. We see through the filters of our inner archetypes. Your gaze, in this sense, is like a beam of light passing through a stained glass window. The colors and shapes you perceive are not pure reality. They are tinged with the patterns of your inner world. When you gaze at a stranger and feel instant dislike, ask yourself, what archetype of shadow are you seeing? Are you gazing at them, or are you gazing at the parts of yourself you have not yet accepted? Likewise, when you are mesmerized by someone, when your eyes cannot look away, perhaps you are seeing the anima or animus, those archetypal images of the soul's inner feminine or masculine projected upon the other, calling you to awaken to your own hidden wholeness. To understand your gaze is to understand the story your soul is telling. It is not simply about analyzing why you look at what you look at. It is about seeing the archetype behind the act of seeing itself. For example, when you look at a child playing freely, do you see innocence and joy, or does your heart ache with a forgotten longing, memory of the child within you who was once silenced? That ache, That subtle shift in the quality of your gaze reveals the wounded child archetype calling out from your depths. Similarly, when your eyes wander to moments of power, authority, or leadership, do you feel admiration or resentment? There, the king or queen archetype is at play, testing whether you have integrated your own sovereignty or whether you still cast it onto others, seeing them as powerful while forgetting your own power. You must learn to listen to your gaze as though it were a dream. Every time your eyes fix upon something with intensity, whether with love, hatred, or fascination, it is like a dream symbol manifesting in waking life. In dreams, we often encounter strange figures and landscapes, which, though external in the dream, are aspects of our inner world. In waking life, our gaze performs a similar function. It draws us towards the outer objects and people that mirror our inner archetypes, allowing us to see parts of ourselves we might otherwise deny, but we rarely stop to ask why our eyes linger where they do. We do not realize that the gaze is the first language of the unconscious. There is a mystical quality to this. Have you ever looked into someone's eyes and felt as though time stopped? As though you were being seen by something larger than both of you. That moment is not just romantic poetry, it is archetypal recognition. When two souls meet through the gaze, the archetypes awaken. The lover archetype emerges, not necessarily in the form of erotic love, but as a deep recognition of beauty, of soul, of meaning. In that instant, you are no longer two isolated individuals. You are participants in a timeless dance, a reenactment of the universal patterns that have existed since the dawn of humanity. The gaze is also a portal to the shadow. That part of the psyche we would rather not see. When your eyes avert quickly from something disturbing, when you cannot bear to look, it is often because the image reflects something unresolved within you. The shadow is not evil, it is simply what you have not yet integrated. It is the neglected parts of your psyche, your rage, your desire, your fears that you cast onto the outer world. What you cannot look at directly in another is often what you have not yet faced within yourself. The courage to meet your own gaze in the mirror without flinching is one of the highest acts of self-realization. For in your own eyes, if you look deeply enough, you will see not just your personal story, but the vast ocean of collective humanity, the archetypes of hero, victim, trickster, and sage all swirling beneath the surface. You might ask, why is the gaze so revealing? Because the eyes are not just organs of sight, they are organs of soul. The ancients believed that the eyes were the windows of the spirit, and they were right. What you look at with love, you bring to life. What you look at with fear, you give power over you. The quality of your gaze, whether it is soft and receptive or sharp and controlling, reflects the balance of archetypes within you. A gaze that is predatory or dismissive often hides an inner imbalance, a disconnection from the lover and caregiver archetypes. A gaze that is naive and overly trusting may reveal an unclaimed warrior, a lack of boundaries and strength. To know yourself, begin by observing not just what you look at, but how you look. In my studies, I have often seen that the gaze can heal or wound. A single look can pierce through the defenses of the soul, either opening a wound or closing one. Think of a child who receives a gaze of love and acceptance from a parent, how that gaze becomes the foundation of their inner confidence. Now imagine a child who only receives cold, indifferent, or critical gazes. That child will grow up with an inner tyrant, an archetype of self-criticism that mirrors the gaze of their caregivers, and as adults, we repeat these patterns unconsciously. We project the gaze we received onto the world around us. This is why awareness of your gaze is so important. It is not only a mirror of your past, but a tool for shaping your future. The mystical truth is that the gaze is an act of creation. Wherever you look with intention, you bring something of your inner world into being. This is why the archetypes behind your gaze must be understood and integrated. If the lover archetype governs your gaze, you will see beauty and potential everywhere, and your life will unfold like a dance with the divine. If the victim archetype controls your gaze, you will only see threat, betrayal, and reasons to withdraw. Your gaze can either lock you in a prison of unconscious projection or open the doors to freedom and self-realization. We are all seekers of meaning, and our gaze is our most faithful guide. It will show us what we are searching for. Even when we do not know it consciously, watch where your eyes go when you are lost in thought, when you are walking down the street or entering a room. Your gaze will always seek out the symbol that resonates with your current inner state. If you are wrestling with the archetype of the warrior, your eyes might be drawn to displays of strength, to people who embody courage or aggression. If you are awakening to the sage, your eyes may linger on books, on the quiet presence of wisdom. In this way, the gaze is like a divination tool, pointing you towards the archetype that is most alive in you at this moment. There is something sacred in allowing yourself to be fully present with your gaze, to observe not just what is before you, but what arises within you as you look. Most of the time, we move through life half blind, our eyes open but our souls closed. We look without seeing, we glance without understanding. We are trained by modern life to consume images like we consume everything else quickly, superficially, without depth. But to look with true awareness is an act of communion. It is to open the door between the conscious and unconscious and allow the archetypes to speak. When I speak of archetypes, I am not speaking of abstract theories. These patterns are alive. They are forces that shape your emotions, your dreams, your relationships. They are ancient, as old as the human soul itself. The gaze is one of their instruments, one of their languages. Consider the archetype of the hero. When this figure is active in your unconscious, your gaze will be drawn to struggles, to stories of triumph, to images of overcoming. You may not even realize it, but your eyes are searching for the symbol of the dragon to slay, the mountain to climb. And in the same way, if the archetype of the lover dominates, your gaze will seek beauty, harmony, and connection. Even in the smallest details, the curve of a leaf, the soft hue of the evening sky, the smile of a stranger. Your gaze reflects what is stirring within you. What aspect of your soul is yearning to be lived? I have seen this truth unfold countless times in my patients. A woman once came to me describing how she could not stop watching the movements of people in cafes, always scanning for someone, as though her eyes were looking for a missing piece. As we worked together, it became clear that her gaze was the longing of the anima, the inner feminine, projected onto the outer world. She was not just looking for a person, she was looking for the unclaimed tenderness, the nurturance, the beauty she had forgotten in herself. The gaze is never just about the object, it is always about the subject, about the deep structures of the psyche that are projecting themselves onto the canvas of the world. Do not be fooled into thinking your gaze is neutral. It is not. Every look you cast carries intention, memory, and archetypal energy. It can wound as much as it can heal. Think of the gaze of envy, how it sharpens and pierces, how it subtly attempts to diminish what it sees. This gaze comes from the shadow, an unacknowledged wound within a sense of inferiority or lack. When we gaze with envy, we are not truly seeing the other. We are seeing the parts of ourselves we have abandoned, now appearing as if they belong to someone else. To reclaim the power of your gaze, you must reclaim these disowned parts. You must bring them out of the shadows and into the light of consciousness. The gaze also reveals the dynamics of power within the psyche. A gaze that cannot meet another's eyes often belongs to someone ruled by the archetype of the child, afraid of judgment or rejection, a gaze that is too intense, torpeerzing, may be controlled by the inner ruler or warrior, seeking to dominate or control. But a balanced gaze, a gaze that sees without clinging, that observes without judgment, is a sign of the integrated self. It is the gaze of wholeness, the gaze that can look upon the world with both clarity and compassion. Have you ever looked at someone and felt as though they were looking not just at your face, but into the very depths of your being? That is the power of an archetypally awakened gaze. It is the gaze of the sage, the healer, or even the divine self that resides within all of us. Such a gaze does not see you as a mere personality. It sees the story of your soul. It sees your struggles, your light, your hidden potential. And when you encounter such a gaze, something within you stirs, as though the archetypes themselves are calling you to awaken. In dreams, the gaze is often a powerful symbol. Dream figures who stare at us, who hold our eyes with unsettling intensity, are often manifestations of archetypes seeking our attention. A dream of being watched can indicate that an unconscious part of you wants to be seen, integrated, brought into awareness. In waking life, we experience the same phenomenon, though we rarely recognize it. When someone's gaze makes you uncomfortable, it is worth asking yourself why. What part of you is being revealed by their look? What part of your own shadow or desire is being mirrored back to you? The mystics of old understood the power of the gaze. In many spiritual traditions, the gaze is considered an act of transmission, a way of conveying energy, wisdom, or blessing. The guru's gaze, the saint's gaze, even the gaze of a mother upon her newborn. These are not just biological acts of looking, they are soul exchanges. They awaken something in both the one who looks and the one who is seen. This is why I urge you to pay attention to how you look at the world and how the world looks back at you. For in that mutual seeing, you will find the dialogue between your conscious self and the archetypal forces that guide your life. It is also in the gaze that we find the tension between the persona and the shadow. The persona, the mask you wear for the world, determines much of how you allow yourself to look and be looked at. If your persona is strong and rigid, your gaze may be controlled, guarded, always trying to present the right image. But behind the mask, the shadow may be boiling, full of desires and fears that leak through the cracks. A sudden shift in someone's gaze, a flash of vulnerability or aggression often reveals the shadow breaking through the persona's surface. When you learn to notice these moments in yourself and others, you will begin to see the archetypal drama playing out in every human interaction. There is another layer to the gaze, one that is almost magical. What you consistently look at, you begin to merge with. If you gaze upon chaos and ugliness long enough, those energies will seep into your soul. If you gaze upon beauty, love, and truth, those qualities will grow within you. This is not a moral judgment, but a psychological fact. The gaze is not passive. It shapes the psyche, molds it like clay. We become what we behold. This is why the ancient symbols, mandalas, sacred images, patterns of harmony, were designed not only to be seen, but to transform the seer. When you gaze at the mandala, you are not just looking, you are allowing your psyche to be realigned, to be drawn towards the center of wholeness. I tell you this because your gaze is one of the most powerful tools for self-realization that you possess. You can learn more about yourself by observing your own gaze than by 100 external observations. Watch how your eyes move when you are in conversation. Do they wander? Do they seek approval? Do they avoid certain people or moments? Every motion of the gaze is a map of your inner world. To master your gaze is to begin mastering your inner archetypes. Imagine standing in front of a mirror and looking into your own eyes. Do not just glance, truly look. Look until the surface identity fades, until the persona dissolves, and you see the deeper archetypal currents moving beneath. You may see the child with its wounds and innocence. You may see the warrior, fierce and protective. You may see the lover, longing for connection. And if you look long enough, with enough courage, you may see the self, the totality of who you are, both light and shadow, personal and collective, human and divine. That is the ultimate purpose of the gaze, to lead you back to yourself. This is not easy work. To confront your own gaze is to confront the truths you would rather not face. You will see your fears, your insecurities, the parts of yourself you have tried to exile. But you will also see your strength, your beauty, your untapped potential. The gaze does not lie. It is an X-ray of the soul. And when you learn to meet it with honesty, you will find that the archetypes within you are not enemies but guides. not obstacles, but allies on the path to wholeness. There is a certain alchemy in the act of looking that is seldom acknowledged, a silent dialogue between the seer and the seen. Every gaze carries a seed of transformation. When you look at something long enough, you invite it into the deepest chambers of your psyche, and it begins to change you just as you begin to change it. This is why the quality of your gaze matters. Do you look with curiosity or with judgment? Do you look with fear or with reverence? Every nuance of your seeing is a statement about the archetype currently holding the torch of your consciousness. We are often unaware of the subtle projections that spill out through our gaze. Think of the archetype of the lover when it is active and unresolved. Your gaze may attach itself to another person with an almost magnetic intensity, as though they hold the key to your wholeness. But what you are truly seeing is not them, it is a reflection of your own unclaimed passion, your own unintegrated longing cast upon their face. The same is true of the hero, the sage, or even the trickster. When you look at someone and feel an unexplainable aversion, there may be a fragment of the trickster within you, a part that fears being deceived or outwitted, and so your gaze becomes a shield, an armor, a way to keep the archetypal shadow of the trickster at bay. The gaze reveals more than words ever can. It is the first language we learn as infants. Long before speech forms on our lips, a child reads the world through the eyes of their parents, absorbing love or rejection, security or fear, simply by the way they are looked at. This is why I often say that the gaze is an inheritance. You carry within you not just your own gaze, but the gaze that was cast upon you when you were most vulnerable. If you were looked at with warmth and presence, your gaze will likely carry that same softness into the world. But if you were met with indifference or cruelty, your gaze may be cold, defensive, hesitant. The archetypes of your inner world are sculpted in part by these early gazes, and to heal them, you must first become conscious of them. Do not mistake this for mere sentimentality. There is a raw, almost mystical power in the way we look at each other. I have witnessed patients who could not look into a mirror because they were afraid of what they might see. They feared that their own gaze would reveal the shadow. They had tried to bury the anger, the shame, the memories that haunted them like ghosts. But when they finally summoned the courage to meet their own eyes, something miraculous occurred. It was as if they were meeting themselves for the first time, as if the self, the totality of the psyche, was stepping forward to say, "Here I am. I have always been here, waiting for you to see me." This is why I encourage you to cultivate a new kind of looking. Do not simply use your eyes as tools of consumption, skimming the surface of life. Instead, let your gaze be an act of presence, of reverence. When you look at someone, do not just look at their face, look at their story, look at the archetypes moving behind their expressions, the lover seeking connection, the warrior guarding their heart, the child longing for safety. And when you look at yourself, do the same. Recognize the archetypal figures that dwell within you. Speak to them with your eyes. Invite them to reveal their wisdom instead of hiding in the shadows. In my work with dreams, I have often encountered visions of eyes, eyes that watch, eyes that guide, eyes that judge. These streams are not random. They are messages from the unconscious, remind us that we are always being seen, not just by the outer world, but by the inner one. There is an observer within you, a part of your psyche that is aware of all the other parts. This inner gaze is the closest thing to the self, the central archetype that seeks to unify all the conflicting forces within you. When you connect with this inner observer, you begin to look at life differently. You stop seeing others as mere projections of your fears and desires and start seeing them as mirrors of your own wholeness. The gaze is also deeply connected to the concept of individuation, the journey toward becoming your true, complete self. Individuation requires that you confront not only the parts of yourself you admire, but also the parts you reject. And this confrontation often begins with the gaze. Can you look at your own anger without flinching? Can you gaze upon your own vulnerability without turning away? Can you meet the eyes of your shadow and recognize it as part of your own soul? These are not small tasks. They demand courage, patience, and a willingness to face discomfort. But every time you succeed, your gaze becomes clearer, more honest, more whole. Consider the power of the gaze in relationships. Two people may exchange thousands of words, but a single moment of eye contact can reveal more truth than an entire conversation. Lovers know this instinctively. A single glance across a room can carry the weight of desire, trust, fear, and vulnerability all at once. But this is true not only in love, but in every human interaction. Your gaze tells others whether you are truly present, whether you see them as they are or through the veil of your own projections. When you learn to gaze without projection, when you learn to truly see, you begin to connect on a level that transcends words. Yet, to reach this state of seeing, you must first become aware of the masks you wear. The persona, that carefully constructed image you present to the world, often distorts your heart. You look through the lens of who you think you should be, rather than who you are. The archetypes behind the persona are not inherently false. They are simply incomplete. They serve a purpose in society, helping you navigate roles and responsibilities. But if you mistake the persona for the whole of your being, your gaze becomes shallow, unable to penetrate the deeper layers of life. It is only when you begin to strip away the mask, to face the shadow, and integrate the forgotten archetypes, that your gaze becomes truly transformative. There is also a secret that few dare to explore. The gaze can awaken the divine. When you look upon the world with the eyes of the self, you begin to see the sacred in everything. A tree is no longer just a tree, it becomes a symbol of life, rooted in both earth and sky. A stranger's face is no longer anonymous, it becomes a mirror of humanity, carrying the stories of countless ancestors. This is what I mean when I say the gaze is mystical. It can turn the ordinary into the extraordinary, the mundane into the miraculous. But this requires a shift in consciousness, a willingness to let the archetypes reveal themselves through every glance. Perhaps you have experienced this in moments of stillness. When you look at the stars and feel as though they are looking back at you, in that moment, the archetype of the cosmic self awakens You realize that you are not a separate observer, but part of the great web of existence, the universe gazing at itself through your eyes. This is the deepest mystery of the gaze. It is not just personal, it is universal. It connects you not only to your own psyche, but to the collective unconscious, to the shared soul of humanity. To truly understand your gaze, you must also explore the role of desire. Much of what we look at is shaped by what we long for. Consciously or unconsciously, desire is not limited to romantic love. It is the soul's hunger for wholeness, for integration. When your gaze is drawn to someone or something, ask yourself, what part of me is longing to be seen here? What archetype is calling for my attention? If you can answer this honestly, you will begin to uncover the deeper patterns that guide your life. There is a quiet revolution waiting in the way you see, a subtle shift that can change the entire architecture of your inner world. The gaze, when unconscious, is merely a reaction, an instinct, a habit, a reflection of the archetypes running unnoticed beneath the surface. But when you awaken to the power of your gaze, when you begin to look with awareness, something profound occurs. The archetypes themselves begin to transform. They are no longer shadowy forces that govern your impulses. They become living guides, luminous beings within you that shape your destiny with intention rather than accident. Think of how your gaze can change the meaning of what you see. A flower in the field is just a plant until you truly look at it. Then suddenly it becomes a symbol of impermanence, of beauty, of the eternal dance between life and death. Your gaze grants it, meaning this is not merely poetic language, but the truth of the psyche. We are meaning makers, and the gaze is one of our most powerful instruments for weaving meaning into the fabric of reality. The question is, are you looking through the lens of fear or through the lens of wonder, through the eyes of the victim? Or through the eyes of the creator? The archetypes are not static forms. They are currents of energy, dynamic patterns that shift as we grow. When you gaze with awareness, you can begin to sense which archetype is speaking through you at any given moment. In moments of confrontation, perhaps you feel the warrior rise within your eyes, steady and unyielding. In moments of tenderness, the lover softens your gaze, opening the heart to connection. And in moments of deep reflection, the sage appears, lending a gaze that is not only seeing but understanding, not only observing but illuminating. When you can recognize these shifts, you begin to live with a kind of psychological clarity that few ever attain. It is also through the gaze that you can begin to practice the art of integration. Each time you look at something you fear, something you have avoided, you take a step toward reclaiming the shadow. Each time you allow yourself to see beauty where you once saw only chaos, you strengthen the archetype of the creator within you. Integration does not come through thinking alone, it comes through presence, through the courage to look at life directly. Even the act of looking at your own pain, truly looking at it without judgment, can begin to transmute it into wisdom. The gaze is also an act of responsibility. What you choose to look at, you choose to energize. If you spend your days gazing only at the flaws of the world, you will feed the archetypes of cynicism and despair. If you direct your gaze toward growth, toward healing, towards the small acts of beauty and kindness that still exist. You nourish the archetypes of hope and resilience. This does not mean turning away from suffering or pretending darkness does not exist. It means choosing how you meet the darkness with your eyes, whether you meet it with fear or with the quiet strength of one who understands that even shadows are part of the whole. You may not realize it, but your gaze also teaches others how to see themselves. A single moment of being truly seen can awaken something in a person that no words ever could. Think of how a child blossoms under the gaze of encouragement, how a friend softens when they are looked at without judgment. We live in a world hungry for real seeing. Most people are never truly seen, even by those closest to them. But when you learn to see through the eyes of the self, through the archetype that embraces both shadow and light, you become a mirror in which others can find their own hidden depths. Let us speak for a moment of the gaze in love. Love, in its deepest form, is not about possession or even about emotion. It is about seeing. To love someone is to see them as they are, beyond their masks, beyond their projections. It is to look into their eyes and glimpse the archetypes they carry, their wounded child, their longing lover, their quiet sage, and to hold all of these with reverence. This kind of gaze is rare because it requires that you have first learned to see these same archetypes within yourself. You cannot see in another what you have not faced in your own soul. This is the true challenge, to gaze without projection. Most of what we call love or hatred is projection. Our inner archetypes cast like shadows onto the faces of others. We fall in love not with the person before us, but with the reflection of our own anima or animus. We hate not the person but the shadow we see in them, the qualities we refuse to acknowledge in ourselves. But when you withdraw these projections, when you reclaim the archetypes as part of your own being, your gaze becomes clear. You see people not as screens for your inner dramas, but as souls in their own right, each carrying their own constellation of archetypes. The same principle applies when you gaze at the world itself, nature, art, the universe. These are not merely external realities. They are mirrors, reflecting back the contents of your unconscious. When you gaze at a storm, do you see danger or renewal? When you look at a mountain, do you see an obstacle or a calling? Your gaze reveals your inner story. And in recognizing this, you can begin to rewrite that story. The gaze, in this sense, is both a revelation and a tool for transformation. Do not underestimate the subtlety of this work. To change your gaze is not to force a new way of seeing, but to become aware of the forces that already shape your vision. When you notice the archetype behind your gaze, you can choose whether to let it speak or to invite another archetype to take its place. Perhaps the victim has dominated your gaze. Seeing only what has been lost or denied, you can gently invite the Creator to step forward, to look at the same world with eyes of possibility and renewal. This is the alchemy of the gaze. It transforms both seer and seen, and yet the most profound gaze of all is the inward one. To sit in stillness and look into the depths of your own being is to encounter the great mystery of the self. It is not an easy gaze. It will confront you with all that you are and all that you are not. It will show you the masks you have worn and the truths you have buried, but it will also reveal the spark of divinity that lies at your core, the archetype of the self that unites all opposites, that holds both shadow and light, that knows you are more than any single identity or story. I invite you to practice this. Find a mirror, not as a tool for vanity, but as a portal. Look into your own eyes without expectation, without judgment. At first, you may see only your surface, the familiar features. The flaws you have been taught to notice. But if you persist, something deeper will emerge. You may see the child who once dreamed, the lover who longs for connection, the sage who waits with quiet wisdom. You may see the shadows too, the parts of you that are afraid, resentful, wounded. Do not turn away. Look at them with the same compassion you would offer a dear friend. In time, you may see something even more extraordinary, the self, the timeless presence that has watched over your entire life, waiting for you to recognize it. This is the essence of my message. Your gaze is not just an act of seeing, but a path to becoming. Every time you look with awareness, you take another step toward wholeness. Every time you meet your own eyes with honesty, you awaken another piece of your soul. And every time you see another person not as an object of projection, but as a soul in its own right, you participate in the great work of individuation, the work of becoming fully human. So I ask you now, how will you look at the world from this moment forward? Will you let your gaze be a prisoner of unconscious archetypes? Or will you let it become a beacon of clarity and presence? Will you look with fear or with the courage to see both the darkness and the light? The choice is yours. But the power is already within you. The archetypes are waiting, watching, ready to guide you, if only you have the eyes to see. Look closely, for your gaze is not just yours. It is the gaze of countless generations before you, the gaze of the collective unconscious, the gaze of the universe becoming aware of itself. When you open your eyes with this understanding, even the smallest detail of life becomes sacred. And in that sacred seeing, you will find not only who you are, but who you were always meant to be.